Good morning. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C. I'm joined today by the Prince George's County Executive, Angela Alsobrooks, our neighbor. We are also joined by the chiefs of police for the Metropolitan Police Department and the Prince George's County Police Department. We're here today in Marvin Gaye Park. We are on our border between Washington, D.C. and Prince George's County to talk about how our jurisdictions are working together to address disturbing spikes in gun violence, specifically as it relates to carjackings. We are particularly concerned about how many young people are involved in these crimes. On our side, in the D.C. side, MPD made 132 arrests for carjacking in 2021. And out of that 132, 85 of those arrested were under 18. We know that the stats in Prince George's County are similar. The county executive will talk about the 152 arrests made for the same offenses, with 86 juveniles being part of that number. And when we share a border, we know that crime doesn't recognize borders. We also know that our kids involved in crimes in D.C. and in Prince George's County are crossing the border. D.C. kids in Prince George's kids in D.C. We have talked in the past about how this pandemic has upended our ecosystem and upended our communities. And it's obvious, too, that crime has been impacted. Part of our work with teens and adults is to re-engage our youth, make sure they're engaged at school, after-school activities, sports, and work. All of those things to make sure they're staying on the right track. We have been successful in scaling up our DYRS programs and our human services programs. And you've heard the chief talk to you already. We're also making sure and looking for increased ways to ensure that everybody is being held accountable through our public safety and the justice ecosystem. And so I want to be very clear that when we talk about accountability from every part of our system, we're not pointing fingers or placing blame, but we're asking everybody to step up. And step up like we're going to talk about doing today. So that's why I'm saying to pay attention to any new laws being considered or the ones that's on the books. Pay attention to prosecutions and sentencing to make sure that when young people use guns, that the outcomes we know can be tragic, and we have to prosecute and hold young people accountable if they're not following the law. And while we are also always interested in creative sentencing solutions, and in fact, we've invested in a lot of diversion programs, deferred sentencing agreements that don't include services and supervision just don't make sense. So we want our communities to be safe for everyone, for the vast majority of our children who are doing the right thing each and every day, for moms, brothers, kids, grandmoms that are going back and forth, leading their daily lives to be safe. And so that is what we want to be focused on, every part of our ecosystem doing what it needs to do to keep our communities safe. With that, I want to turn over to our county executive from Prince George's County and our friend and neighbor, Angela Alsobrooks.
Good morning, everyone. I want to first begin by thanking Mayor Bowser for being here today, and thank her as well for her leadership and for the amazing partnership that we share. I'm so grateful for it. And we're here today, as she mentioned, to talk about an issue that has become so serious, not only for Prince George's County, but we're here because this issue also is very serious in Washington, D.C., along with other communities all across the country. As the mayor mentioned, carjackings, along with other violent crimes, are up in the Washington metropolitan region. We've seen an increase in carjacking since the pandemic began in 2020, and in 2021, carjackings continue to rise. Even more troubling, as you have heard, juvenile arrests have outpaced adult arrests. Children between 12 and 17 years old are responsible for a significant portion of the increase in carjackings that we're seeing both here in the district and in Prince George's. These young people committing carjackings are not from one place. Young people from Washington, D.C. and Prince George's County are crossing lines to commit offenses, contributing to a rise in violence all across our region. This is an extremely serious issue, which is why our county is committed to working with Mayor Bowser and the district to fix this rise in violent crime. Preventing crime, and you've heard this already, by children committing crime isn't just one person's responsibility. As we work in government with the courts, the police department, and each other, we cannot hope to solve this problem with these tools alone. What the numbers tell us is that our complex and interconnected society, our ecosystem, is damaged. And when an entire ecosystem is damaged, we need everyone involved to come to the table to fix it. The blunt truth is that our children are angry. Many of our children have been emotionally traumatized. And as we well know, hurt people hurt people. The depravity, the sheer depravity that we are seeing in the crimes that are being committed are a reflection of what these children are experiencing both at home and in the community. They must be healed and they must be held accountable. And as we repair their ecosystem, then we will be able to see our children healed. Be clear, the government can't do it alone. These police officers who work so hard day in and day out can't do it alone. The courts can't do it alone. We need everybody to step up. These families have to step up. The children's parents have to step up. The community has to step up. And we need our faith leaders. Everyone in the community has a responsibility to making sure that our children are healed. And Prince George's, what I can tell you is that I've been working directly with our courts to create a strategy that will help address this problem. I want to thank Judge Tillerson Adams, who is our chief judge, and thank the system for working with us. What we understand is that our children have rights, and we want to keep them out of the judicial system whenever possible. But as adults, we have a responsibility to protect them from entering a life of crime. And we have a responsibility to ensure that our neighborhoods are safe. As elected representatives of our community, we have a responsibility to protect our residents. Be clear, our youth have rights, and so do their parents, their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and the rest of our community. Parents should be able to drive to work without worrying about having their car stolen. These children's grandparents should be able to pick up food without fearing for their lives. No one, as happened in Prince George's County, we had an older man who went to a gas station. He was accosted there. He was carjacked. He was stabbed. And not only was he stabbed up about his upper body, he was stabbed in the eye and lost his eyesight. No one should be able should have to go through this. And so we've apprehended carjackers as young as armed carjackers, 12 years old. And so we understand that our government has an obligation to promote both justice and freedom. We've talked a lot about justice, meaning that we want to make sure that what happens is fair and transparent and that the rights of our children are respected. And we demand to have freedom. The freedom to go to the grocery store without being accosted. The freedom to drive into your driveway in front of your home without being attacked. The freedom to go about your daily life. And so we want both justice and we want freedom. And as we work on crime prevention strategies, we've ramped up our focus now on reducing violent crimes committed by our children. This past spring and summer, we worked to engage our youth, many of whom have been deeply impacted by the pandemic. The Alsobrooks Summer Passport Experience and our Summer Youth Enrichment Program provided our children healthy, constructive outlets and safe opportunities to socialize. Now, we're ramping up our efforts also to reduce violence and to engage our youth and young adults through our county's Hope in Action anti-violence project. And I want to thank Pastor Tony Lee and the Community of Hope and all of our faith leaders who have come together to help us in this effort. We launched this program in late October of last year, and this will help prevent violent crime through our focus on targeted care designed to interrupt cycles of violence that we've seen far too often in our youth. The program will use 4 strategies. We're working with peacekeepers and credible messengers to to prevent violence before it can start. We're combining diversion and reentry services, which offer first-time and recurring non-adjudicated youth offenders assistance, along with the state's attorney's office. We're using community and school-based wraparound services to offer aftercare for our children, after-school enrichment programs, mentoring, food insecurity. We're dealing with case management and access to in-school peer support groups. And our fourth strategy is a work group called the Violence Prevention Task Force. This task force is currently being formed, and once membership is set, the group will meet and identify areas of critical need and work to develop short and long-term strategies to reduce violence. This group will also help us identify the concerns and needs of our families, including the needs at home, and we understand why this is so important. You can't heal children without also healing their families. And so we're going to be asking that task force to look at the needs of parents, to find out what our mothers need, what their fathers need, what their families and what their support systems need to be successful. We're currently accepting applications for this task force, and I encourage all of our residents in Prince George's County to step up and apply. Come out and help us. We're also in the process of reviewing grant applications that we've received from nonprofits and community organizations for Hope in Action. These groups will partner with us to provide greater programming for our youth. And so what we are doing is everything in our power. I know the mayor is doing everything in her power as well to reverse the rise in violent crime and to provide our youth a safe and stable place to grow up. But understand this, Mayor Bowser and I cannot stand here and coordinate. We can't work with the police community and with others without also the work of our communities, without the collaboration and cooperation of our communities. The truth of the matter is that this will not be resolved at the police station. Be clear, it won't be resolved at the courthouse. It is not going to be resolved alone by the government. It will require our entire community to get involved. Parents, families, community leaders. This is how this will be resolved. If we wait for it to be resolved at the courthouse, it will never happen. If we expect it to happen at the police station, it can't happen. This cycle must be broken in our communities, and that's the reason that we're here today, is to ask everyone in our community to continue to be engaged in this. The mayor and I will continue to work together. We'll continue to work with our chiefs of police who you will hear from today. We're going to be working with everyone. But this has to end. It absolutely has to end. And again, we must heal and hold accountable the young people who are committing these acts of violence. Thank you so much. And I believe from here we have Chief Conti.
Good morning, everyone. You know, this morning before coming out here, I was really kind of reflecting on the issue that we're dealing with, and I've been talking with Chief Aziz in Prince George's County about some of the things, some of the tactics that we want to really build upon. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But, you know, I really have to give credit to the mayor and the county executive, because it really can't be put any more perfectly than what's already been said. We have to be able to hold people accountable. We have to give services. We have to do all of that. But we have to hold people accountable for the actions that they are committing in our communities. That impact me, it impacts everyone that's up here, and it impacts all of you and all of you who might be watching this. You know, I have a saying, people respond differently depending on their proximity to the pain. When it happens in your block, in your neighborhood, it's your mother, your brother, your sister, your father who gets carjacked, people respond differently. And I've been on this police department long enough to recall back in the early 90s when carjacking was an issue in our city and in many cities across the United States. And as a result, I believe it was a death that occurred in Howard County as a result of a carjacking, where changes came about then. And what did those changes look like? Those changes came in the form of holding people accountable. Those changes came in the form of not letting people be out in community who are committing carjackings. Not letting them be in community. How often have community members heard me say, people can't carjack if they're not out in community? And as I've looked at the stats from Chief Aziz from Prince George's County and what we're seeing here in the District of Columbia, It's exactly the same thing. It's the same thing. Over 100 kids in the District of Columbia arrested for carjacking. Over 100 kids arrested in Prince George's County for carjacking. Where are these young people right now? Are they receiving the services that we hope that they should receive? Where are they now? They're in community. I assure you they are in community. And when they are in community, it becomes very difficult to ensure that accountability happens the way that it's supposed to happen. Let me tell you something. Playtime is over. This is not a video game. This is not a game where we're playing chicken and we're not going to figure out what it is we need to do here. The mayor and the county executive have already stated it. We got to come together, and everybody, this is not a spectator sport, everybody has a responsibility here. Community members have a responsibility. Courts, judges, the police department, people who prosecute cases, all of us have a responsibility. I'm pleading to the community as a father, as a responsible father. I do not allow my children to cut up in the house and do things and then not send them outside. They may go to their room. They may have to sit down for a while, but there's accountability that comes along with the love that I give them as a father. We have to challenge ourselves. Are we really showing our children love by allowing them to carjack, put a gun in somebody's face, and then send them back out in community, and we call that love? If that's love, I don't want no part of that. And you should not want a part of that. We should want better for our children. And sometimes the reality is that our children are in not so good situations at home. That is the truth. And when they're not in good situations at home, why are we so in a hurry to put them back in a situation that's not good for them, that allows them to carjack people? Last year, we had 456 carjackings in our city. And yeah, we can arrest people and arrest people and arrest people, but are the children receiving the things that they need, the healing that they need? Is that happening? And if it's not, why not? We've demonstrated leniency. We said we arrest less people, we do all these things are going to get better. Well, we've arrested less people. We've increased the number of kids that have been arrested for carjacking 2-to-1, outpacing the number of adults that have been arrested. Look back, I challenge you, look back and look at what the penalty is for adults when they carjack. Why is that penalty what it is? Why did carjackings go dormant for so long? If it calls for commitment, then it causes for commitment. And commitment in the form of sitting some of these young people down. Because when their friends see them carjack, and they're back out in community the next day, what's the motivation for their friend not to do what they do? Like I said, playtime for games, it's over. And we all have to come together and take this issue for the serious issue that it is. And not wait until there's a loss of life. Oh, I seem to recall we had a loss of life last year with respect to young women who carjacked a man. Last year, I formed the carjacking task force in the District of Columbia last year when we called this issue out last year. And here we are, a year later. What has changed in the system? What we know that has changed in the system is that the number of arrests have went up. But the rest of the system, we must look at that to see where are there opportunities for improvement. As the mayor mentioned, this is not an exercise in finger pointing. But if we can sit here or stand here and say that we all don't have a responsibility in this, then we're fooling ourselves. We are fooling ourselves. It is not going to get corrected by a government program or the police locking everybody up. It's going to take all of us to get things the way that we want them to be. So, just really quickly, a couple of things I want to talk about. The carjacking task force that the Metropolitan Police Department started last year, we're building that out and we're expanding our carjacking task force because it has demonstrated at the very minimum that we can connect cases, that we can take people into a custody and we can lock them up for the carjackings that they commit in community. First thing. In addition to that, we are committed to increase collaboration to address the regional issue through cross-border initiatives with our partners here in Prince George's County. As Chief Aziz and I looked over the people who are being arrested, and you look at the number of people who are being arrested in the District of Columbia and also being arrested in Prince George's County, it's the same kids. It's the same kids, but you can't go into a D.C. court or Prince George's County court and talk about, well, what they did over in the other jurisdiction. There should be, fundamentally, there's a problem with that. There's a problem with that, and we have to make sure that collectively that problem is being addressed. The other part is the cross-border initiative. Many years ago, we did cross-border working with our partners at Prince George's County Police Department. The chief and I are reviving that, where we want to have metropolitan police officers and Prince George's County police officers working the borders of the District of Columbia, because oftentimes what we see are young people committing crimes, and they head straight for the border. They head straight back to home base being in D.C. or home base being in Prince George's County. So we want to shore up our partnership there and make sure that we have a very robust intelligence sharing strategy. Some of the specific tactics and things that we will do behind the scenes, obviously we won't talk about those things, but I will assure the community that we will work with Prince George's County and spare no expense with respect to doing the things that we need to do to hold young people accountable and make that information public. Make that information public about the arrests that have happened and what's happening with those arrests. And what I would suggest that community members do is follow these cases through the system. If you see somewhere along the line where things are not being held accountable as they should be, then that should be a question that community is raising. Are the penalties and are the things that are happening with this particular individual, with this particular incident that happened, or just in general, does it marry up with what you believe should happen when a person carjacks someone? I know what it is for adults. Right now we're talking about young people specifically because of the sheer numbers of them. The sheer numbers of them. And the reality is, right, with these cases, they have not been moving through the system. So those are the key things that I wanted to touch on really quickly. I got a little excited up here because, I'm just really passionate about this issue, and I'm gonna just turn these comments over and not worry about it. But if you take away nothing else that I say, I'm appealing as a parent, as a daddy first. As a daddy first, what do you want for your child? What do you want for your child? Because see, here's the other sad reality that people won't talk about. See, I get to see it. The chief get to see it. When these young people progress through these crimes and we're not holding them accountable, I end up standing over top of them when they dead. And how can we help them then? Right? I end up standing over top of them because they dead. Because the average person that is arrested for homicide in the District of Columbia, 11 times they've been arrested prior to their homicide. And in many cases, the victim is the same story. So when do we want to jump in and help? Do we want to jump in and help on the front end of this thing? Or do we want to get in, again, when Chief Conte has to stand up, or Chief Aziz at a press conference and talk about the sad life that's been lost and all that kind of stuff? When are we going to start taking this thing seriously? It's a collective effort, and I appreciate the community support to make sure that we are holding people accountable when these types of crimes are committed in our communities.
Thank you so much, Chief Conte. I think you heard Chief Conte and the passion that he speaks with. And I think it was well warranted, Chief. The leaders that I stand beside here, I don't know how I could say any words to reiterate more the importance of standing here today to talk about this issue at hand. I heard my county executive talking about the rehabilitation, and sometimes you have to rehabilitate people on the inside until they show that they can live properly among us on the outside. And I heard the mayor talk about it's not finger pointing, and it is not finger pointing, but it is what Chief Conte said about accountability. So when will we hold everyone to the same accountability in which we are held? And that is an important statement to make. First, I'll cover some issues here, or some items, and then I'll expound on them. And I want to first start by thanking my county executive, Ms. Angela Alsobrooks, the D.C. Mayor, Bowser, and my friend and compadre, Chief Conte, for their partnership and their exemplary leadership on the critical issues addressing violent crime, especially carjackings. They've outlined our jurisdictions are seeing an increase in carjackings, and unfortunately, more and more juveniles are committing these violent crimes. In 2021 alone, we had 393 carjackings. 393 carjackings. 12-year-old carjacking. We arrested 66 adults and 86 juveniles. So far in 2022, that trend continues. More juvenile arrests than adults. And this cannot continue. Our communities deserve to be safe, and the juveniles committing these crimes, they deserve a brighter future. But they also deserve accountability. In Prince George's County, to tackle this growing number of carjackings, we've established our carjacking interdiction unit. When I first arrived here, we noticed that carjackings were on the rise. And even as far as last week, I was looking at some statistics. And I went back to the 90s. And in the 90s, it said we had a carjacking problem. And that was interesting. And then it got to the mid-2000s, and it said we had a carjacking problem. And that was interesting. But what was not noted was the numbers after that that said that we resolved those issues then. And even now, we can resolve these issues now through hard work and resolve, through that determination. When we centralized our carjacking investigations team and assigned a team of talented detectives and leaders who are strictly dedicated to reducing these crimes through these cases, and we are seeing some success. Since September, that unit has made more than 90 arrests. The unit could not close this many cases without a strong relationship with our partners at DC Police. I'm from Texas, so it's cold out here. Yeah, they gave me some hand warmers, but they didn't seem to be working. See how this collaboration works? The communication between our agencies is around the clock and effective. In addition to our carjacking interdiction unit, the PGPD's gun intelligence unit is hard at work to investigate each arrest for those who commit gun crimes or the commission of gun crimes in our county and in our jurisdictions. The unit is focused on neighborhoods which see an increase in shootings and violent crimes involving guns. The unit's job is to identify the shooters and build cases for state or federal prosecution. Since September, they've also been tasked with reviewing firearms in cases in the county and following these cases throughout adjudication. In 2021, PGPD, we recovered 1,399 guns and made 941 arrests. So arresting is not the problem. Arresting is not the problem. The community often calls upon us to make arrests, and we've done that. You've called upon us to make less arrests, and we've done that. So what is the next step in resolution? We realize that we won't arrest our way out of any issue, but we remain committed to supporting programs like the Office of Community First, the Police Athletic and Activities League, things like my county executive mentioned with Hope in Action with Pastor Lee. And inside of this are stats that would sound astounding, except to police chiefs like me and Chief Conti. Carjackings in Prince George's County in 2019, we had 93 carjackings and 21 juveniles were arrested. In 2020, we had 263 carjackings and 77 juveniles were arrested. In 2021, I mentioned we had 393 carjackings, and then we arrested 86 juveniles, outpacing adults. And so far, if you add those together, we went over 100 arrests for juveniles. We've had just 11 so far this year of juveniles involved in carjackings, which seems to be an amazing statistic, except to people who see this every single day. The people you see behind you, we're no stranger to these numbers. The juveniles that we are seeing involved in these cases, young people who have no fear of the consequences that are involved, meaning they have no fear of accountability. At Prince George's County and Washington, D.C., we share more than just the border. We share a joint future, a collaborative mindset, and we seek a safer place to live and work and play, to shop, to be entertained in that safe environment. Our collaboration on our cross-border initiative resulted in the successful apprehension of suspects involved in the carjacking of the candidate for D.C. Council. Without that collaboration, we would not have arrested that individual and led us to more information involving homicides. That's where the projection goes, carjackings to homicide. Chief Conte and I, and the leaders you see before you, we will continue to work with our criminal justice partners in an accountable way in this system to keep focusing on accountability so we can share the common resolve to keep our residents safe by working side by side. And we will interject ourselves in what I call this vicious cycle. And this vicious cycle that often revolves around poverty, being born in a certain situation in a certain part of town and getting a certain education, which is poor, and attending a poor school and getting a poor job, and then introducing your kids inside that cycle while we introduce programs to help you become accountability. And on the other side, then we interject ourselves and not just standing here singularly and alone and by ourselves, that we must enjoin our other partners that revolve in this system, that we are just one cog in this wheel. And that one cog in this wheel, from policing to the state attorneys and district attorneys, to commissioners, to judges, to NGOs, from our charities, to people in the community for reentry, for rehabilitation, that if we don't act as a collective fist, as a collective entity, and a collective ecosystem, then we will fail. So again, we stand here to call on that accountability from young people, that they will see consequences to their actions for taking a gun and putting a gun to someone's face and taking their property without consequences, without fear of that. We will hold accountable our partners in this criminal justice system, that we go 100% to what we say we do best. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. I want to thank all of the speakers. The county executive and I will take a few questions with the chiefs. I also, before I do that, want to thank all the men and women of both departments who are working under outstanding leaders to make sure that we're keeping our community safe. So what I heard in all of the comments is that we need everybody to step up in their lane and do our jobs. We also need to focus on how we heal our young people and hold them accountable. And then that is the basis of real love and commitment to their future. So I'll start here. Channel 9.
Megan Rivers here from Channel 9. Chief Conte mentioned that for a while you didn't see a lot of carjackings in D.C. And now that number has spread to juveniles and outpacing 2 to 1. Do you think that older people are putting younger people up to these crimes because the punishment is not as severe for juveniles as it is for adults?
Chief?
Certainly there could be a case of that, a one-off, but in general, no, it's not that. I mean, we've seen young people who commit carjackings just for the fun of committing a carjacking. They have friends who see them do it, they do it. We've had young people committing carjackings, and while they're being pursued by the police, they're live streaming themselves, laughing, right, as they have committed their carjacking. So I don't think that it is a thing of people putting up other young people up to it. I think that we have a system in place right now that allows young people to engage in this type of behavior, and the consequences have been very minimal.
Yep, sir. Just introduce yourself, please.
Brad Bell, Channel
Hey,
7.
Brad.
Okay. Where is the failure? Madam Alsobrooks, I mean, in Prince George's County, there's one judge that handles all of the juvenile cases. We're hearing stories of the same juveniles being arrested over and over and over again for carjackings. Where is the failure? You're talking about accountability, cogs in the wheel, Chief, is a phrase you've used. Who's at fault?
Well, it's hard to say that there's any one part of the system. What I've said is that the entire ecosystem is broken. I think the act speaks for itself. All of it's broken. We have children who are not only committing one offense after the next. You've heard the chief say that they have no fear, that they mock the system. We also know that hurt children hurt other people. And so we know that there is a responsibility that's shared by all of us. The government has a role to play in terms of making sure that our children have places to live that are safe, and that they have the food that they need, that we make the mental health care available to them, that the programming's there. We also have to make sure that our parents have the tools that they need to support their young people. And the community has a responsibility. Parents have a responsibility. The court system has a responsibility after these arrests have been made, also to make sure that these children are held accountable. The state's attorneys, everyone in the ecosystem has a role to play. And so you say which part of it is broken? All of it, if you ask me. And I think the act speaks for itself. Anytime we see these numbers increase in the way that they have, and the sheer depravity of the cases. I mentioned that one case of a person who lost his eyesight. That's depravity that I tell you I haven't seen, and I've been in this system for a long time. I started in 1997 as a prosecutor. This is increasing in a way that is alarming and should be very alarming. Everyone has to step up and do better. Everyone.
Where's the failure? You're making the arrests.
Which chief?
Which chief?
Four chiefs.
I don't think I can say it any better than what my county executive said. I know you know that, Brad. You're asking things that you already know that I'm going to say. But this is what I would add to it that would be just a little bit different. It is a true failure in our system that we sit in circles like this, but yet the accountability is here. The accountability is only here. When we get true accountability, then our other partners that are in the system will be challenged for their actions. Will be challenged for their actions. That means something because the police are challenged. Our leaders here are challenged. So who else gets challenged in this system and held accountable for the results? That's all I can add to it. I think that's simple.
Yes, Stephanie?
Question for the mayor and the chief for the DC side, if you do not mind. Chief Conte, you had spoke about changes that held people accountable. Can you be more specific to the laws that you see have changed that are no longer holding, especially juveniles, accountable? And on the legal side, what, if anything, can you two do to address that? And then my other question is on the joint task force. We know that you have all been working together. The OAG's office has one addressing the same issue. So what exactly is new here today?
A couple of things. Thank you for your question, Stephanie. So for the part about what changed with the law, it's not so much of what changed with the law. With the adults, we know that there are things that are already in place. There's no legislative change there. But the issue that I see is, how is it that a young person carjacks somebody today and in very short order, prior to their trial, and we know that, with the COVID restrictions and so forth, that could be a ways off, that young person is back out in community. That is a problem. And I think that there is an issue there that we really have to examine, right? Whether the case is prosecuted and all that good stuff, we've had those discussions, right? But a decision is made at some point. What is going to happen with this young person? I think that's kind of part of what the chief is talking about, right? I mean, we lock them up, and it goes to the next phase. And they say, okay, next phase, what are we going to do here? We're going to, we're requesting that this person be held. A decision is made at that point. Should this person be held, or what should their status be? And we have to have an examination of the entire system to really kind of get to the root of it. In terms of the second question that you answered, yes, we have, collaborate. I think the big takeaways here for the Metropolitan Police Department and Prince George's County on the MPD side of the house, we are expanding our carjacking task force. We're embedding someone on the Prince George's County side, and we're also going to be doing our cross-border initiative where our police officers are actually working together. There's some things that we kind of got to work through or whatever in terms of, legally what that entails or what our limitations may be. But that is an important part of this, because the kids are going back and forth across the lines, and we cannot do what we do and be effective at what we do if that partnership does not exist. And right now, it's really not formalized. It's more of, hey, this officer over here knows this officer over here in the county. A carjacking happens. A 6D officer picks up the phone and calls an officer in the county kind of thing. And we have to be more formal than that. So the expansion of the task force is a big thing for the Metropolitan Police Department because that has shown to work. And then again, like I said, the cross-border initiative piece and embedding somebody with Prince George's County.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Casey with Fox News. I have two quick questions for the mayor. The first being, President Biden is going to New York City tomorrow to address guns. We've seen a crime surge in cities across the nation. Is this a gun issue specifically, or is there something else going on? And I can ask my second one after you answer, if you prefer that.
Sure. So we've talked quite a lot about guns and the easy availability of guns crossing borders, going up and down I-95, going in and out of D.C. from Maryland and Virginia, and the very easy access that our young people are having to with guns. And the chief can tell you how many of these carjackings, I dare say probably the majority of them, involve a gun. So we know, and speaking of accountability, we have a focus on dealing with all people who are using an illegal gun, and a focus on making sure that the courts are getting those cases through, and that people are being held accountable at the point where they have a gun. We have worked across the board with the ATF, as well as the United States Attorney's offices and neighboring Virginia counties, to focus on limiting access to guns.
One more quickly. You said that there's no reason to point fingers and discussing the root causes or who's to blame for this crime and carjackings. But the AG seems to, he went to Twitter over the weekend and said that you are indeed blaming the prosecution side. What is your reaction to that?
I'm not going to go back and forth with like politics, because what we're doing right now is way more serious than that. And somebody mentioned, I think it was the chief mentioned, that we all are held accountable by our bosses. And my bosses are the people of the District of Columbia. And I've been to too many meetings where they're concerned about public safety. As the county executive said, the fear and anxiety are here, and our residents, I haven't heard in a little bit, in some areas around carjackings and robbery attempts. And so I know my job is to take to the people of the District of Columbia what we need. We need our Metropolitan Police Department to have all of the resources they need to deploy strategically and effectively where they can make a difference in communities. That's important. It's also our responsibility to provide services. And we have so many programs and services. I heard the list that the county executive listed. A community group asked me the other day, what can we do to help? That doesn't involve the police. Help connect people and families that you know need help to programs and services that are out there to help them, because we have a lot of those programs and services to help everybody. We've also been very focused in the district on working with the Superior Court. We actually would like to provide services to justice-involved young people that the courts are providing now. We want that responsibility. So we'll continue to work with the courts on an arrangement so that we are supervising young people that have been involved in crime and not the courts. But it is also true that not every person, not every young person should be in a diversion program. I think what you heard in the chief's remarks is the idea that everybody should be out of the system and at home to rehabilitate. Well, if a family cannot help their young person rehabilitate, it is our responsibility to make sure that young person is rehabilitated. Now, we should also point out New Beginnings. You know what New Beginnings is? It's our place where committed youth are rehabilitated. It is an opportunity, if you ask me, and this message is not for you, it's for our judges. It is an opportunity for a young person to get on the right track, to get school, to get counseling, and to be out in an environment where they might kill or be killed. That's an opportunity. Any other questions? Yes.
Good morning. I'm James Wright with the Washington Informer newspaper.
Yes.
I have a question for either Executive Alsobrooks or Chief Aziz.
Okay.
In Prince George's County, you have municipalities. These municipalities have police departments. What role, if any, are they going to play in terms of this carjacking effort?
Well, let me say we work really closely with our municipality chiefs, and we have been for many years or decades. What we're doing now is strengthening our information exchange. We have many police officers in those municipalities who can help us with these things. But what I was told as far as about 3 weeks ago in our last meeting is that they needed more information and better statistics in order to help them. We've already addressed that by giving information in almost real time to those municipalities, but we haven't strengthened the bonds in many years. And we're working to strengthening those bonds with our municipalities. They play a very vital role. And without those police chiefs and their leadership and their action, Prince George's County and our police department and our county would not be as successful as we have been.
I just told James that was a good question. Because there are a lot of resources that can be brought to bear on this problem. I know that the chief calls on federal resources as well, including the ATF, DEA. They made a recent very important arrest involving, I don't know even what you call it, but people died because of this bad drugs on the street. So they're all bad, but fatal. Okay, Mark.
I hear you guys saying, particularly on the DC side, about diversion not working, and that all these juveniles, you seem to be saying that they're reoffending, and that's what I want to know. Do you have data? Can you show us that these kids who are arrested once, put in a diversion program, not sent to New Beginnings or some place like that, sent back into the community, are then reoffending? Because we hear you kind of implying that, or at least I infer that from what I'm hearing, but is there any data that actually supports that?
Yes, but let me correct you on one thing. I didn't say diversion doesn't work. Diversion can work. It's just not appropriate for every situation, and there has to be appropriate supports in that diversion. So we have very successful programs that we have supported in our Department of Human Services. And there's also supervision of young people who have already been committed on the court side. So diversion can work. Supervision certainly should be working. And we need to make sure that all of the supports are there. But it's also not appropriate for every case. Mark, you do know that we're limited in what we can say about youthful offenders. The chief may be able to say something in some.
I'm just going to add one thing.
sorry.
I just want to add one thing. And you know what? This is just a blunt answer. The truth of the matter is we're not here to celebrate how successful we have been in these programs, because if we were successful, we wouldn't be here talking about this. We're talking about 300 in Prince George's and 93 carjackings, primarily committed by children. And so we know that we have programming. We know that some of the programming works. But the blunt truth is, if it was working as well as it should have, we wouldn't be here having this press conference. And so we have to do better. We know that the juvenile system's aim is to rehabilitate children. They are not being rehabilitated because they're out in our communities harming our residents, terrorizing them, traumatizing them, and they have been traumatized themselves. And so whatever we're doing, the point of this is that it is not working nearly well enough. And as the mayor said, I'm hearing from our residents as well. They don't feel safe. And these crimes are no longer being committed just in gas stations and at convenience stores. These children are in people's driveways, harming them. And so it's just at a point where it is not working. And that's why we're ringing this bell today and saying that whatever it is we're doing, clearly it's not working nearly well enough, or it's not working well enough for us. And we have to do different and do better. And everyone has to do better.
All right, we'll take a few more and then we'll stick around.
Do you know how many?
Yeah. Hey, Mark.
Do you know how many? The car racing put out numbers of how many juveniles he prosecuted. 70% of the 100 that you arrested. I've asked his office; they've not been able to give me the data. How many of those arrests ended up in diversion? Do you know how many end up in diversion and how many reoffend?
Yeah, I'm not sure the number that actually ended up in diversion, Mark, but I'm sure he will be able to provide that to you. I'll tell you what my gut tells me. As I look at the data and as I talk to Chief Aziz and compare names in the law enforcement circles. Their children. Let's just say if none of them reoffended. The fact that between Prince George's County and D.C. we have over 200 young people that committed a carjacking is staggering to me, and it should be to everybody. There are instances where there have been young people, as we look back over the case of, or look back over the last couple of years, some of them have been repeat offenders. But in terms of what that exact number is, maybe we can share that information specifically a little later. But the other thing that we're seeing, when I look at, for example, and we talked about this yesterday, I look at, for example, in D.C., here's one of my kids that committed a carjacking in D.C. And that same kid get arrested by Chief Aziz folks over in Prince George's County. Are you able to go into court in Prince George's County and talk about what happened in the District of Columbia when we arrested the kid for carjacking if he did a carjacking in Prince George's County? And that's a problem, right? That in itself is a problem. Beyond that, just not whatever happens on the judicial side of things. That's not my lane, so I'm trying to kind of steer clear of that. But with respect to the young people that we are arresting, the other piece of this, which makes this a little murky to kind of talk about it, some of the young people, Mark, that we arrest the second go around, we haven't even talked about the ones that get arrested for the stolen autos. You know why they get charged with stolen autos? Let's talk truth for a minute, right? And you look at those numbers, why they get arrested for stolen auto and not carjacking, because if they carjack somebody, they got a gun in somebody's face and a mask on, the victim can't identify them. So when we do catch them, we can't charge them with carjacking, but we will charge them with the stolen car. So when I look across the county borders, okay, how many of my kids have been arrested over in Prince George's County for stealing a stolen car? Those numbers, I want to say it's up somewhere around like 38% of kids, right? But I mean, it is a problem, and people are trying to focus in on the one-offs or the this or that. The bottom line problem, 200 kids between D.C. and Prince George's County arrested for carjacking should be alarming to everybody, whether they repeat offender or not. The repeat offenders, that is a glaring problem, but the fact that they did it one time, the fact that a 13 or 14-year-old one time thought it was okay to put a gun in somebody's face and take their car, we have to look at what we're doing here. And as the county executive, the mayor, and the chief have all said, it's a holistic look at the system, Mark. What is everybody doing, and are we doing as best we can in that space?
Okay.
Let me add some on this, because I think I want to add that, because he asked the question, and the answer is yes, we can. We can show you statistic after statistic of juveniles who have been arrested multiple times, 10, 11, 12 times, so much that we put that into some kind of matrix where we can understand the juveniles who keep re-offending without consequence. So yes, we can show you that. So again, I'll expound. Then when are we going to enjoin the rest of the system to say, what are you doing? At what point are you going to be held accountable? At what point will that juvenile reach out to us because we've been doing so much reaching? And at one point will we say, enough is enough? We don't need you further victimizing people in our residents in our cities and our counties.
Okay, so I have one question here, and last question, and then we'll stick around for questions. Yes, sir.
Okay. Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
My name is Mandela. Oh, thank you. I'm a community member from up in Capitol View. So I'm acutely aware of this carjacking problem, having witnessed two in my own neighborhood. But I'm here to talk about a connected issue. Here we are on Marvin Gaye Trail, and if you look around or if you follow it down to the end, you will see that we have a playground that is completely falling apart, but also a playground where there was a murder in maybe the middle of June and July, right there in front of it. So we have both a failure of a failure of our young kids for the most basic things, safe places to play, and a failure to get the youth in our community connected to the services so that they cannot engage in criminal activity right there where our children want to play. So what I wanted to ask is, what can we look forward to from your office as far as addressing, of course, the playground itself, but also the surrounding community?
Well, we are very engaged in this community, I think you know. When I just drove past a lot of the investments we've made right here at Strand, what we've made in our public housing. I will take a look at the park, have some DGS officials here, and we'll work on that. But if you're asking me about who killed somebody in that park, I want the police to address that, because if somebody died there, we should want to make sure that that victim has justice, and that we're cleaning up everything in our communities. But thank you for that question, and we'll take a look at it. I think the second question was here, and then you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Katie Metler. I'm with the Washington Post. I'm just wondering if maybe both of you can address what work is being done currently to work with the state's attorney's offices or prosecutors in both jurisdictions to sort of mitigate this or address what the chief just talked about, which is these juveniles who are being arrested over and over and over again, and then sounds like being released back into the community.
We have a regular coordination with our criminal justice partners called the CJCC, the Crime Justice Coordinating Council, where not only members of my administration on the executive side, including the Attorney General for the district, who is responsible for youth prosecution, but also federal partners and our courts, which are also our federal partners. So we are doing some ongoing talks about how to make sure all parts of our ecosystem are working better. We've also added some work to that, and the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety is here with an initiative that's focused on people of all ages who we think need more intense services through our Building Blocks initiative. And as they get those intense services, we hope that we prevent them or stop them from engaging in crime. As I was standing here, I mentioned to the chief, like even our regional coordination, which is also these folks and us, we're talking all of the time. But I think following some numbers and providing some public feedback on what we're doing together, we'll work on a way to do that.
So similar to the mayor, we're working with our state's attorney's office. We have a criminal coordinating committee, and we also have regular crime meetings that do involve the state's attorney. So we've been in communication with the state's attorney and the state's attorney's office. Our state's attorney did form also a carjacking task force, and the government has participated also in that carjacking task force. And so we're all in regular communication, and we'll continue to do so. Judge Tillerson Adams has convened a group. We were able to meet last week. We're going to include the state's attorney also in that group, where we meet not only with the police department, the courts, the sheriff's office, and everyone, but we'll be continuing to sit at the table and to come up to with solutions on these issues. But these are real serious issues, and again, everyone has a role to play, and we're going to all just hold each other accountable to play our various roles.
Thank you. Last question.
Thank you. I'm Jenny Gafford with WAMU and DCist. One of the criticisms made by advocates and also your opponents in this upcoming election has been that your administration hasn't really seriously invested in non-police methods of violence interruption and haven't been sort of included, given a seat at the table in the comprehensive planning around this stuff, and that those positions of violence interrupters and credible messengers haven't been adequately professionalized, given the resources they need to really be part of this work. And I'm curious what your response is to that with regards to both this issue of carjacking and also just violence more broadly.
Well, I don't know what you call a $58 million investment in 1 year. I don't know what you call doubling the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement in the time that it's been in place, I think 5 years now to today, doubling its resources and professionals and creating an entire government agency. But what I call it is a real investment in techniques that we are hopeful will work over time. Even the main proponents of these of techniques say that it takes time. Well, we've been willing to put the district taxpayers' dollars into that hope. And what that means is that we're hiring people that go across neighborhoods that we have identified as the most serious crime. We've created a structure for intense services for individuals who have identified as being most likely to commit crime or be victims of crime. And we've put all of those resources out into the streets, including working with our nonprofit partners with providing grants and services. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, County Executive.